And it said we live, Racette. So hey, Celeste, so let's do it. I just did my intro, and so let's just go ahead on and do the darn thing, okay? And
thank you, Mary.
Well, thank you for joining. I really appreciate that. I really do. So let's get into it. There's some questions that I'd like to ask you. Number one, what is the duties and responsibilities of a mayor? I think people need to know, because a lot of times people really don't know the duties and responsibilities of our elected officials. So what is the duty of a mayor, and how much power do she has or he has?
That's a very good question. So the mayor is sort of like, compared to USD at large. The mayor is an at-large city council person, and the mayor has really no more authority than any of the other 6 city council members. However, the mayor does lead the meeting, and the mayor is supposed to be aware of the policies and ordinances of the city so that he follows that tone when he leads the meetings. But he's kind of like an at-large candidate. Everybody else represents a district, right? District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But the mayor doesn't represent a district. It's an at-large position. Similar to USD 259 has an at-large school board member.
Okay, so what power does the mayor have when he's working with those 6 other district representatives? What power does he have when it comes to hiring and firing and overseeing the way the city is run?
Very good question. So she has the power to be one of 7 votes, and she has the power to set the tone for the rest of the city council members. So it's really important that whoever is mayor, he or she, needs to be mature, needs to be knowledgeable, needs to be fair, and needs to build a consensus. So if, let's just say, the city manager needs to be fired for whatever reason, they've got to work to get 4 votes, their vote and 3 others, to terminate the city manager or to approve a motion. So it's really important that the mayor shows that collaborative spirit and that cooperative consensus building among the other city council members. That's really important.
And another question it puzzles me. You know, the city has been besieged by a lot of corruption, and they did manage to terminate the human resource person, but not the person. I mean, not everybody. You know, in lieu, city manager Robert Lake. I'm just going to lay out a name. Why hasn't the city council, who have 4 like-minded Democrats supposedly on the council, why haven't they mustered up the strength or the wherewithal to do the right thing when it comes to getting rid of corruption in the city, at the city level?
That's a very powerful question, Mary Dean. And part of the problem, I believe, is that, for example, I supported Mayor Whipple's campaign. I'm a longtime Democrat, come from a Democratic family, but I was really disappointed when I saw that he approved Topgolf Star Bonds, which is in the wealthiest district of Wichita. Yes. I was disappointed when I saw handouts at Riverside TIF. They called Riverside area the Sims Parkland blighted, and gave a 1.7 handout to developers to build $400,000 homes in Riverside. Blighted, are you kidding me? So right. I've been really disappointed in people who I worked for, I campaigned for, I gave money to, and within a short amount of time, they were doing the same handouts and the same deals that they had run on. And that's when I decided to run, because the corruption is strong. It's been going on a long time, and I call it pay to play. And when you look at campaign contributions, you see these people who are expecting something for their vote. That's the pay to play. And it's the same developers. It's the same special interests. Now, here's where I think I'm different, because I'm sure you, like other long-term Wichitans like me, are wondering, will it ever change? And let me read assure you that when I was a fraud investigator for the FDIC, I went against some very powerful, very wealthy men. It was usually men. So in this case, I'm going to say men that tried to bribe and intimidate me. And it didn't work because I have a very strong North Star, very strong moral ethics.
Mhm.
And when they bribed me, it didn't work because to me, it's about being fair to everybody. And I guess that's how my father and my mother raised me and my church raised me, is we are to take care and treat everybody the same, regardless of their social status, their economic status, whether they're living on the street or in their home. We are to treat every human being with dignity, compassion, and respect. And I don't let any powerful person or wealthy person change my mind, including payday lenders who are absolutely abusing people who are poorly desperate for that payday loan.
Yes, and I admire you for that because I have seen you working when it comes to saving Century 2 and standing up in city council meetings and asking those tough questions. Also, I think you know that District 1 and District 3 are the two poorest districts in this city. Now you're talking about blighted. It's blighted in those two districts. I live in District 3. We don't have a food store here, the food desert here in District 3 and a food desert in District 1. But they can conjure up all kind of monies to make sure that those well-to-do neighborhoods and various certain districts are really doing well. But the people in District 1 and District 3 are not. How do you feel about that? Because I am so dismayed and upset that they are willing to give money to big businesses and large developers and whatever. It's shameful. It really is.
I hear you. So you're right. In the past 4 years, I've been standing up in front of the mayor and city council to say, why are you doing this? Why are you giving a $4 million loan to Jim Corrick for his Fairfield Inn and Water Walk? Why are you giving Phil Ruffin, all the revenue out of Century 2 for meeting rooms and food and beverage? Why are you giving 1.7 in a handout to Dave Burke and Jerry Jones to build Riverside $400,000 homes? Why are you giving Rodney Stephen $1 million to run the Wichita Eye Center and then letting him walk out of there without making but one loan payment in 10 years? So I've spoken for 4 years about this, and I feel like they've been staring at me doing nothing. And that's been so frustrating, but I've tried to be the fearless voice and speak up for people. And I tell you, Mary Dean, if we didn't have our faith, if we didn't have our backbones, I don't know what the world would look like today, but you know what? I'm absolutely willing to lead the fight. And one thing I'm really proud of is the Ball Stadium was charging an 8% development fee on everything in the Ball Stadium, plus 2% CID, 7.5 sales tax. And I took my receipt for a $16 beer to city council and said, no one's going to go to the Ball Stadium. This is too expensive, right? And they said they couldn't do anything. So I filed a complaint with the district attorney's office and got a $63,000 refund. And that refund I approved going to 6 charities for Christmas, including Touch Closet, ICT Food Rescue. So that's one of my missions in life, is we need to redirect these millions of dollars that are pouring out from taxpayers back to where it's needed most, such as the food deserts in the areas you were mentioning. I was at a meeting where they were talking about, in the public forum, the NAACP was there talking about a food desert. And after they spoke and they went away, you know what was next on the motion to approve by city council? $350,000 going to landscape Union Station, put in pavers, landscape. And I'm like, you just heard this need for a grocery store in this area. And what did they do? $350,000 to Gary Orbany with Union Station to put in pavers and landscape around that area. Are you kidding me?
Yes. Celeste, I found out when I was running for city council that for District 3, that District 3 and District 1, a lot of people were renters. And so if you're not a homeowner, paying taxes and whatever, they completely ignore your needs. Now, is that fair? Because people that are renters, they still pay taxes, you know, on food and everything else when it comes to cities. So I just don't understand why, you know, this is a ignored segment of the population here in Wichita. And then when people come out and campaign, first thing they want to do is play on your, you know, your relatable connection that you have with certain people. But they're not willing to give someone else a chance to make sure that your needs are resolved. So what do you think about that?
Good point. And that came up in another question last night. And one problem I see is the city currently owns 350 homes that could be sold inexpensively to people who are renting and perhaps not quite have all of the money they need to get a house on the market that's gone, you know, in a day, quickly sold. So why is the city sitting on 350 homes that they've bought in areas in the core of Wichita? Why aren't they selling these at an affordable price so people can start getting out of rental properties, owning their own home, building equity? Because that's the way to provide for future generations, is to start into home ownership. I'm mystified at why the city and Places for People has languished since 2019. And we buy these houses and we don't return them to people who would love to have their first home and get started with home ownership. Then if the second thing on that is too, is it seems like in DABs, where there's supposed to be a voice of the people, they're not getting the information. Even if you are a renter, how would you have known that if you were renting a house in 29th and Grove, that you were on a contaminated groundwater site?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm stunned at the lack of transparency, honesty, and accountability. And I spoke about groundwater contamination in 2019 in front of city council, but I only knew at the time I only thought we had two that I spoke about, North Industrial Corridor and Gilbert and Mosley. And after I spoke saying, clean these up, let's take care of these groundwater contaminated sites, do you think anyone said one word about 29th and Grove?
Mm-mm.
And
no,
so
they were more concerned about Gilbert and Mosley.
But it's like, that's where people are renting. That's where people are living. That's where children are fishing out of that lake. And to not pass this information on to the people in that area who may be renters, sure, may not own their home, someone else owns it, maybe an out-of-state landlord. You still have to filter that information down to people about the safety of the water they're drinking.
Absolutely. I've been stunned myself going to some of these meetings with Ajane Bennett, who has been the face of this contamination and the TCA and the vapors and all of that. I have just been stunned of the lack of accountability and the lack of, you know, not giving a hoot about the people that live in the area and how it has affected and impacted. You know, I went to the Canada's Forum at St. Paul's Sunday, and I heard a lot about mental health and homelessness, and we hear that all the time, every time an election comes up. I think the only reason why they're really somewhat trying to focus on the mental health part is because of Cedric C.J. Lofton and what happened to that child when he was having a mental health crisis and a breakdown, and how he was treated. What do you think about their efforts? And is it a little too late, or, you know, it's good that they're trying to do something when it comes to mental health, and especially with our children? What do you think?
I think we absolutely have a problem there. And so I can see why that's a question asked. Since COVID hit, domestic violence has increased dramatically in Wichita. Street violence has increased dramatically in Wichita. And part of that is due to mental health disturbances or trauma-based experiences in the past for individuals. So I think we have to start putting resources into that part of our population that needs help. So I think it's good we're addressing it. And I know the homeless has increased And unfortunately, the largest growing population of the homeless right now is families. And we just closed, Salvation Army just closed their emergency shelter for women with children. I was a single mom after my divorce and supported 3 kids. So I can't imagine we are closing a shelter that's serving women with children. So it's actually a frightening situation where I think we're going to continue to see more homeless children and more homeless families on the streets. So we've got to start addressing what's driving it and provide the resources to shelter these people, to put them up in shelters. And one thing that baffles me is Wichita has a lot of billionaires. One of them starts with a K. I'll just be blunt, Coke. And one thing that when Chung came and did the Chung report, he was really mystified why Wichita's philanthropic, wealthy individuals don't put more back into the community. Like in Omaha, Nebraska, Warren Buffett gives back the majority of his fortune to that city of Omaha, Nebraska. And that puzzles me too, is why aren't philanthropic individuals and organizations helping to keep the Salvation Army shelter open, right?
Yeah.
We've got billionaires living in Wichita. They could easily keep that shelter open for 5 to 10 years. So it mystifies me, but unfortunately, it's going to fall on us, the citizens, through our tax base and through grants and through ARPA funds that they've scheduled aside to help with homelessness, mental illness, and the violence interrupter program. They're going to have to do it.
And speaking of grants, Celeste, there are several small organizations, nonprofits that are doing great work, boots on the ground, interacting with community, but they're on the verge of closing their doors, like CHD, Tracy Mason's a boxing organization. And I just don't understand how the city can give grants and money and support to these silo organizations that they feel comfortable with, because nobody's going to question what they're doing. They're making them comfortable where everybody else is uncomfortable. Why can't they support organizations like CHD to make sure that these at-risk children are off the streets and have something to do? Because the city don't have the programs anymore. They've closed a lot of them down. What do you think? Why? What's going on?
Good question, Mary Dean. I wish I had the answer, because I've held up. Let me show you something. I've seen where the ARPA funds, this is from the website. We have ARPA funds from the federal government that have been budgeted to help illiteracy, food deserts, at-risk youth. And of the money that's been slated, we've spent nothing or zero or less than 1%. And I've challenged the current administration, why aren't we using this money that's set aside to help with these needs you've just mentioned, after school programs or the boxing program or League 42 or whatever is out there to help our youth? And I'm mystified by it too. But I promise you that is one thing that needs to be spent, is it's been slated for it, right?
Yeah.
So get the money flowing. Let's start seeing some positive results. I'm mystified by it too. And I've challenged Mayor Whipple when he gets up there and he says, oh, we spent all this money on the program. And I'm like, wait a minute, zero has been spent on that program. So I'm
sorry. Celeste, I heard that Sunday about all the good programs and stuff that that ICT has. And I'm like, okay, I'm out here in the streets. I talk to the people. Who are you helping?
I'm as mystified as you are. It's part of the it's not transparent. It's not accountable. You can't tell, you don't know. This is part of what's wrong with City Hall. And that's why 72% of Wichitans surveyed said they don't trust City Hall, because you can't get simple answers. That's a simple answer, right? I tried to call Mary Hunt yesterday about Places for People, because her name's on the website, to figure out why we're sitting on 355 houses. And you know what she told me? I have nothing to do with it anymore. How'd you get my name? And I'm like, you're the one on the website, the city's website, Mary Hunt, with your phone number, in charge of the program. And I'm trying to get some answers. And she gave me 4 other names of people to call to try to figure out who's in charge of the program now. What are we doing with the program? So I understand your frustration. I feel it too. I have no answer for you why we're not giving grants and why we're not putting the money into the hands of people who are willing to do the work and make the difference.
Let me ask you this question, Celeste. Since the city has that money and it's been set aside for organizations such as CHD and Bryce Graham's Launchpad, which he does with him and his wife Tina, does an amazing job with when it comes to the summer camps. A lot of money's coming out of their pocket.
Yeah.
Who do we call them? Say, hey, you need to come up in here and see what's going on with this money that's been set aside but is not used. Who do we call? As a citizen, who do I call?
Your city council representative.
Okay.
Your city council representative. And you know what? I know I'm preaching to the choir, Mary Dean, but I've stood in front of city council and the mayor and said, you are forgetting we are the boss. The taxpayers, your constituents, we are the boss of you and you work for us. You need to listen to us. And in 4 years, maybe I've made a little bit of progress to get answers, to get to the bottom of what we've done. But let me tell you, there's a whole big area that hasn't been accounted for. We need to hold them accountable. And it's been tough. It's not easy, but it's city council district members, hold them accountable.
Yes. And another thing, FOP. We have a district attorney that has been more than willing to dismiss and ignore some of a lot of the officers that have done at least, I think it's 15 shootings. It's been 19, but only 15 have been, they're not being held accountable for what they've done. And the FOP is willing to stand behind these corrupt officers that have done racial texting, that have murdered in cold blood citizens that didn't stand a chance. What do you think about the FOP? Why hasn't the city manager or the city council done, when they come to negotiations, why haven't they put some safety nets in there for the citizens of this city?
Yeah. So that's kind of a 3-pronged problem, I think, in my personal opinion. And the first problem is, like you mentioned, the city manager. Who's in charge of everybody in the city of Wichita? The city manager. And when he doesn't know or claims to not have known that Chris Brzezinski had whatever in his personnel files, what do we do when we turn to city manager Layton and say, how did this happen? What does he say? I need a study. I need to pay money to have someone come in and do a study because I don't know. If I had been that way in my job in the private sector and had said, oh, I don't know why I screwed up, but let's do a study and see what Celeste did wrong. Are you kidding me? I would have had a demotion. I would have been put on probation, possibly lost my job. But for whatever reason, city manager Layton seems to be untouchable. And if something goes wrong, we pay for another study to see what we could do to improve it. So that's the first problem. City manager Layton's not being held accountable. So the second problem is, why is that happening? And I truly think that the answer to why he's not being held accountable is when you saw Mayor Whipple whip out his cell phone when he was stopped by the officer at the neighborhood cleanup to jump. He was trying to jump the line with his truck full of garbage, whatever. And he whips out his cell phone and he speeds dial city manager Layton to say, I got stopped. Who's the chief police? And by the way, this officer doesn't know who I am. Can I charge him? Whoa, right there.
Right.
The mayor's taking advantage of his position of power, and there was an ethics violation that was held up against him. He violated the ethics policy. If you're going to speed dial city manager Layton, do you think that you're really going to hold him accountable if you're depending on him to bail you out when you do something wrong? So that's the second problem. We're riding on his power, the mayor and city council are, to get their way with life unfairly. And then the third problem is that I think is really problematic is when we were looking for a new police chief. I was there when they interviewed the final two candidates. Sullivan won the job. But I asked then, why don't we have a whistleblower hotline that goes outside the police force so that if there's corruption or there's racism or there's behavior that's been observed, it needs to go beyond Wichita Police Chief Sullivan, outside to another agency, outside the FOP, outside to someone who you can report to and be protected from. And he thought that was a good idea when he was interviewed, but to this date, we still do not have a whistleblower hotline. And I even asked for that again when I took the Citizens Police Academy recently. Why is there no whistleblower hotline? So you absolutely have to set up controls of oversight, or you have checked power. And those are the three things that I see that are contributing to this situation we have now, where there's distrust between the citizens and the Wichita Police Department. And I know there's good people in that wearing blue, good men and women. So we've got to restore this trust, and we've got to put controls in place and hold people accountable. So we've got to do a better job moving forward. And that's where I see three places we need to start immediately.
Yes. And I want to say before I ask you the last question, because I know you're a busy woman, but I heard Fry Sunday talking about the pools that the city saved. Well, I really wanted to say to him, you didn't save any pools. The people that saved the pools was the women pool warriors up for McAdams. And that was Donna and myself and a bunch of us that when I went to the city council meetings on the daily, you know, to say, hey, McAdams should be saved. And not only did we save because of our voices, McAdams, which is now McAfee Pool, but 8 aquatics, as he said at that meeting. And I just wanted to correct Councilman Fry on that. You didn't save anything. It was the women pool warriors that did. So that being said, Celeste.
Kudos to you for doing that too, because we lost Edgemore and Orchard Park, and I've heard complaints from moms that say, my kids can't learn to swim in a splash pad. Why did they close the pools? So
Right.
You're right. That's a correction that needed to be made. And bless you for being one of those women warriors who knew you needed to save the pool.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm gonna end this by asking you to tell people who you really are. I already know you, but I want other people to know who you are, Celeste, in closing.
All right. I'm a fearless voice. I have always stood in my lifetime for honesty and integrity. And I have worked hard throughout my life, whatever my situation, married, divorced, single mom, to represent what is best for everybody, whether I was fighting ruthless payday lenders or entitled men who had embezzled money and lied to me that they hadn't and I had to find it, or when I was in banking and credit unions, making sure that people hadn't been charged unfairly for NSF and overdraft fees. I was raised to be a servant leader. In my family, my father was a role model for servant leadership. And I am really proud to say that I will represent the citizens of Wichita, and I've been endorsed by Marjorie Wright and Elma Broadfoot, the former female mayors of Wichita, are endorsing my run to be the next mayor of Wichita. And I'm so blessed that they have come out for me. They were just here this morning.
Well, congratulations. And I applaud you, and I admire your tenacity and what you be doing, Celeste. And so I'm just gonna say, because I'm biased, you got my support system. You do. And so, again, thank you for being a guest on Seasoned Women's Podcast. It's been an honor, and you have a good day.
Back at you, Mary Dean. Back at you. Thank you.
Thank you.